medicine. I'm a registered nurse. I'm currently still working a few days a fortnight, which won't be for too long because otherwise I'm going to be older than anybody else I'm looking after. I started my training on New Year's Day in 1961 in Charters Towers Hospital. At that stage it was a training hospital, and my parents were on holidays. I got the offer. I was 16 and a half, and it was a big surprise to my parents because I'd already won scholarships to do other things which I didn't want to do. So that's where I started. I did 4 years training, as we did those days, in apprenticeship type training, which was very interesting. I've still got friends to this day that I trained with. I finished my training, and because it was a relatively rural hospital, most of us went to a big city to do our midwifery, which was what you did those days. You went straight and did midwifery because you wouldn't get a job otherwise if you weren't what they called a double certificate system. So I went to the Royal Melbourne. I left home in February in a sun frock and little else, got to Melbourne, and it was freezing. I thought they were all crazy when I looked out the plane window and saw them all with shirts on. Well, I soon learned about Melbourne coming from Charters Towers. So I did that, then I went back. I was asked to go back to Charters Towers because the theatre sister had gotten sick, so I went there. I ended up after that in theatres in Greenslopes. I left Greenslopes heading for Gladstone. On the way I met a friend who had just been there and said, "Don't go there, it's awful." So I went to Warrabinda, would you believe? Went to Warrabinda for a long time, and I had a lot of interesting situations out there. I ended up being the only person. I drove up and the matron and her 2 kids drove out, and that was it. I left there and went to Billawheeler, and from Billawheeler I went to, eventually to Gladstone. I arrived in Gladstone in 1974, I think. Yeah, okay. This is a photo of me at about 17 years old. I was what we call a pupil nurse. You can see by the uniform that we didn't wear aprons in North Queensland like they did in the more southern states, but it was very strict anyway. On the top of this, actually this is a photo, this should be here. We had a bar that showed our years, and what year we were. We had a 2-inch starched belt, 5-hole lace-up shoes, so you had that plan, and we wore stockings. And you could stand these uniforms up by themselves almost, and that's me. Yeah, it was the hospital's responsibility to provide us with uniforms, but there were pretty strict rules. We had to have white knickers and bras and certain coloured tan stockings with seams up the back, and I got a terrible surprise when matron found out that we put eyebrow pencil up the back of our legs. We were very surprised when she realised that. So because it's pretty hot up there. This is me when I started, and this is me when I finished. Okay, me getting my certificate as a registered nurse. There were only 4 of us. It wasn't a big school. I started with 2 other girls who, one got pregnant and then you didn't work then, you just couldn't work, and the other one just decided it wasn't for her and walked out. But I made it with another 4 girls who trained that same year, and I graduated in 1965, I think. Yeah, but I'd finished my time about, I don't know, finished my exams in the August or July of the previous year, so I had a lot of time to make up. I had about 14, 15 months to make up. And when we did that, when we finished our exams, we became butterfly. And this is the veil you wore when you were a butterfly. This is my friend. We're having a chat in the pan room. You can see the old Pam hopper behind us, the Charters Towers Hospital. Butterfly veil was worn when you finished all your exams and you just had time to do. So you couldn't be registered, and you could work, I suppose in the southern states they called it a staff nurse. The butterfly, yeah, it was up like that and it was tied, and then you pulled out the little wings like a butterfly. Yeah. With the heat, and especially if it rained, like, you know, and that you'd have the humidity, they'd just all collapse. So would our veils. So we used to put skewers, I think, to make them stand up. We didn't question anything much. We just did what we were told, and I don't remember them being a problem, except the only thing is we used to have steam tents with the kids that used to get croup, and you'd have to get into the steam tents, and there was steam. It was like a kettle that put steam into a tent, and you put the tent over the cot. You'd get into the steam tent with the kids, because these kids were tiny, and your veil would just collapse all around you. But so would your uniform and your hair and everything else. So I don't remember them being a terrible inconvenience, and it was quite an honour when you got your veil, so I suppose we put up with anything.
You're very proud to wear them.
Yeah, we were very proud. And it was very... It was, I suppose it was a status symbol, but everybody knew who the registered people are. They don't know. It was starch, and it was called... I forget what it was called, but it was in little bits, and you'd mix it up with cold water, then you'd mix it up with hot water, just like you made...
And real thick white stuff.
Just like you'd made glue, and it went real stiff. And you dipped your veil into it, you wet it first, dipped your veil into it, and then you squished it all out, and then you carefully hung it up to dry, and when it was nearly dry, you'd iron it. And you'd have to have another cloth over the top of it.
Or you get black burning things.
You'd have an ironing cloth over the top of it, and you'd iron it. Yeah, probably. And they were kind of muslin. They weren't cotton. They were you could see through them. They were like I don't know what the heck it was called now, but yeah. But if you weren't,
muslin.
Yeah, it was muslin. Anything, but
we didn't have them. We didn't have anything different for 4th year.
Didn't you?
No. We just have a normal hat and then into our veils. And I
didn't have the
never
butterfly?
had and I never had a veil because I went straight into paper.
No, we were. Oh God, we would have killed things.
Because I used to like to push the boundaries.
Thing is, when you had this piece of cloth on the top of your veil, if it was too wet and you went to take it off, sometimes you ripped the whole middle out of the veil. That wasn't good. And it was doubled on the edges. It was about that big with little holes all around the hem. However they did it, I don't know how they did it. My great-grandmother had her own hospital in Gundywindy, and this is her. This is Flora Marion Klein. She was born in 1870. It's proposed that she delivered the first white child in Gundywindy. She had her own hospital.
I'm Pamela Ann Brown, and I did my training to become a registered nurse. I've since retired. And I started off in psych nursing because I'd done a new thing that was out of computer, and I did it for 6 months, and I knew as much about it after 6 months as I did when I started at the beginning. And I thought, I hate this job. Computers were much bigger than this room is, and it was all maths, and although I liked maths, I didn't like it concentrated as it was. So I thought, what will I do? I know, I'll go up and do psych nursing. And so that's me on the intake to do our psych nursing. And that was our tutor, Mr. Lamont. And on our first day, he said, now we're going to get all these things out of the way that you need to know. I want you all to tell me a dirty word for sex. And I'd come straight from a boarding school, so I found that difficult because I didn't know any actually. But after that day, I knew about 40 of them. And then the next day, he taught us how to test for sugar. So we all had to go and pass urine, put it into a test tube, and he said, now look at the colour of it, get your specific gravity, and then you're right to start for testing for your sugar. So you put your finger in. Yes, that's got sugar in it. I can't do this. And everybody else was looking wide-eyed. We were all 16 years and 10 months. And one of the girls said, I saw what you did. You put that finger in, you tasted that finger. We were very, very relieved. Anyway, so I did 4 years of psych nursing, which I really enjoyed. And we had no tranquilizers or anything when I started. We just used to tie people up in jackets and big, thick leather straps. And then in my second year, they had this new drug called Largactil, which revolutionised, because we often come home beaten up and covered in bruises, and Largactil fixed all that. So after 4 years of that, I thought, I will now go up north, and I got the paper, read the paper, and there was a job going at Gladstone. It wasn't for a psych nurse, but I thought I'll go there anyway. There'd be dusky maidens and waving palm trees and lovely things. So I caught the train, came up to Gladstone, got out. No taxis. There's only one taxi and he was off that day, so I had to get my bags and lug it all the way up to the hospital. Much excitement. The circus had just come to town. The boys were coming to take everybody out that night. And the girl said, "You come?" I said, "Oh no, I have to unpack my bags." And about 3 o'clock up came all the lads, no shoes, sand shoes, no laces, ties through their pants. And I thought, this is different. But I had 3 days off. I didn't work anything, had 3 days off, and then I went to work. And I thought, I don't think I'm ready for Gladstone at this point. So I packed my bags, threw them in the girl's ute. She took me to the railway station. I went back to Sydney. Thought I'll do something else. Didn't like that place. The matron was a matron Zambay, a lovely woman, very Polish, very strict. So I thought I'd never see her again because I did a runner. And then I took on breeding chooks and ducks. I had stacks and stacks of chooks and ducks. And I thought, yes, I can make a living out of this. And I went to Sydney with friends for the weekend. I had a phone call from my mother up there, wherever I was staying. She said, "Get back home immediately. Your dog's killed all the ducks and the chooks. Get right back here and clean this mess up." So I went down, there's about 100 all told, cleaned it up, and she said, "No more of this rot, you get a job tomorrow," which was Monday. So I thought, well, I'll go up to the hospital and see if I can get a job doing general training. I wasn't the least bit interested in nursing. I rather fancied my life breeding ducks and chooks, but anyway, we all have little hiccups in our lives, so off I went. Started there, absolutely loved it. This was me in my training days, and with the doctors in our training days, with the deputy matron in my training days. I'm the tall one. My training was different to what they do today. If you did something bad, which was like forget to put your note in for your uniforms, you would have to go to the preliminary training school and do punishment for a couple of hours. Something gruesome like writing an essay on the digestion of a ham sandwich or a blackberry sandwich, and you had to talk about the seeds in it. And you never ever thought to challenge. It just wasn't acceptable to challenge. You did whatever you were told to do. But that didn't stop us from sneaking into the matron's private dining room and seeing what delicious things she had in her fridge, or taking a little bit of petrol out of her car when we didn't have any money. Because whereas I earned £18 a week doing psych nursing, when I went to do my general nursing, I was on £2.7 and 6. So that left nothing for us to spend. I had a horse. I used to ride the horse up to the hospital. We had a horse paddock at the back of it. Put the horse in there, and when I'd finished my week's work, hop on the horse and go home. And then we only had graduations once every 2 years, so I had gone on to, worked in a geriatric hospital, 3,000 bed geriatric hospital for 3 months. And then I went up to Thursday Island, and that was the beginning of the rest of my life, and it was just a wonderful place to be. On the third day I had to go back into general. They'd put me out at a TB hospital, but it had been shown I had no antibodies, so I had to come back into the general. I said, "Okay, what time do I get picked up?" They said, "No, you make your own way back." I thought, I don't even know how I got here. So I'd heard someone erecting lights or something, so I walked around, saw little houses. That was one of the houses that the TB patients lived in. and that was the place that I lived in. It didn't have any doors. I was terrified that I'd be murdered in my sleep. So I found this man up a ladder fixing up something up the top of a post, and I said, "Are you going to go back to town?" He said, "Yes." I said, "I wonder if you'd give me a lift." He said, "Yes, certainly." So he came straight down and got my bags. Away I went into town to the nurse's quarters. To cut a long story short, I married him 10 months later. And at the time he said to me, "Where would you like to live?" I said, "Anywhere in the world, except Gladstone, of course." And we've been here 51 years now. It was my uniform at Thursday Island. We wore dresses, whatever dress you wanted, a uniform, but I had blue, pink, green, white. You wore hibiscus in your hair, and because it always rained, we all wore thongs. So it was very, very different. That's outside the nurse's home. One of the things that stood out for me was if somebody died, you would get the wardsman who would take the deceased patient to the morgue, but you had to make sure you put water in the jam tins before you left. The legs of the bed were in fruit tins, and you fill water in so the ants couldn't get up there before the funeral. So that was different. I stayed there for about 14 months. This is my graduation with my parents and the sister. That was 68. And that was the photo that went into the paper, because I went to TI and the other girl here went to Tasmania, so they put down the Flying Sisters. And I was quite a celebrity because no one ever got into the papers. You were very important if you did that. And then when we came to Gladstone, I went up to the hospital, yes, got a job there, and it was a raging flu epidemic. And so we worked 13 days a fortnight because everyone was dropping like flies. And in spite of being so au fait when I started, it was just a job to get my mother off my back. Couldn't have thought of a better job. It was a wonderful job, and did lots of things up in Gladstone, and did 17 years at community health. We never knew what we were doing for the first few years. It was such a difference in our job description.
We were brought up in an era where you did what your parents said, you trusted adults, and you went nursing in an apprentice kind of situation. So you met the expectations of that profession, and you had people above you. And what was great about it in a lot of ways, even though you were considered junior to anybody that even started a week ahead of you, those people mentored you. You taught each other, you supported each other. You had some pretty tough times when you're young, and we were really pretty young. We didn't think we were, but we were. And I can remember one time this little girl fell out of the back of a ute underneath the wheels of the ute, and she was killed, but she wasn't dead when she came into A&E. And her mother was absolutely distraught, as she would be. She was driving. And that baby died in my arms. And when I went back to the quarters, all those girls knew, and they sat up with me and talked to me till about 2 o'clock in the morning. I was barely 17. That's what I think the people miss today, is the companionship and they have counsellors, we counselled each other. We talked about it. If you weren't doing the right thing, you were told. Yeah, you couldn't get married. Well, you could get married, but you couldn't stay nursing.
Well, so you were locked in every night at 10 o'clock?
Yeah, they come and check you and make sure you're in bed. Yeah, I couldn't even, my mother was a great golfer, and somewhere down the line, one of the nurses had been out there and gotten herself inebriated, and I don't know what she did, but she did something. So all of the nurses for that year could not go to the golf club. I could not even go with my mother, because that was the rules. Never questioned it. I couldn't do it. I was told I couldn't do it. I didn't do it. So, weak or not, but I came from a very matriarchal family of very strong women, but that was the rules, and you stuck to them. Didn't do us any harm, I suppose, kept us safe. And if matron didn't like your boyfriend, she wouldn't allow you a pass to go to the dances or the movies. She'd say, who are you going with? And you'd say, you're not going with him, that's it. You go to the movies, and she'd write it in the book, and then when you came home from the movies, you went in and you reported to the sister on night shift. And that was it.
You'd have one late pass a month.
Yeah.
And that was until 11 o'clock.
That was 11 o'clock, and you had to be in.
You had to go to your night sister to check in, and she'd take you away.
This was the student nurses. Once you were a registered nurse, you usually didn't live with the student nurses anyway. You had your own part of the nurses' quarters, but a lot of the single nurses still lived in if they weren't married, but they could be married and be registered, and that was after your 4 years training. And they could live in. They didn't have to report in. They were free to come and go. But no, as a student till the day you finished, that was it. You had to ask.
But you never had
permission.
old nurses. Everyone started
early. You didn't have nurses like mature aged nurses. Well, I don't remember any. Yeah, and and then the night shift used to come around at 10:30 and make sure everybody that didn't have a pass was in their bed. Lights out. That was it.
And if you had forgotten to do your fluid balance chart on your night shift, what happened?
They'd send for you. If you were on night shift, you could be sound asleep. You'd get woken up, you had to get into uniform and go back over into whichever ward you were working and finish off your paperwork.
Your chart. Mm-hmm.
That's it, yeah. But even if you didn't clean the pan room properly, you were like, we used to have Bon Ami. And it used to have to polish all, remember? Had to polish everything, all the sinks, the old boiling sterilisers, the pan hoppers, that old pan hopper there, and stuff. You had to polish all of them, and then you had to get this rag, and you couldn't leave any white stuff, could you, Pan? And we used to boil urine in the pan rooms then for various tests, sugar and pus and stuff like that, didn't we? And all of those, all of the, what do you call them, test tubes had to be cleaned and turned up on the thing, and we used to do it all with the Bunsen burner.
Had to be able to see your face in the Bunsen burner, you had to polish it up.
Had to polish the Bunsen burner, mind you, and every now and again, God help you, you'd be boiling it, it'd boil up and hit the roof, and get a bubble underneath it. That was mind you, that we were boiling. Yeah. I mean, I don't know about anybody else my age, but we didn't get pocket money. Or anything like that. We did our jobs, and a lot of us did lawn mowing and stuff for people. Might get 5 pence or something like that. But when I started, I think my wage was something almost £5, $2.50, and then the next year
it wasn't enough to buy anything.
Yeah, we got a rise. It took me about 2 months to pay off my watch, which was £40. And that would have been every cent. And the chemist, who was a friend of my parents, actually got it for me, and I paid him back every payday because we had to wear the watch, and it was £40. That was a lot of money when you're only earning 5. But we got a rise, and it was 9 pence. So then we got the £5.
Home to Gladstone was getting $57 a week.
70.
At the end of 69, beginning of 70, and it wasn't much money.
No, it weren't very well paid, but it was quite true. I mean, when you lived in and did things like that, and none of us had cars, or if we did, they belonged to our parent. Yeah, but because New South Wales and Victoria all had higher wages than Queensland. So that's why a lot of it, when we finished our training, went south, yeah. But I came back, I went to Melbourne and did my med and worked there private nursing and over at the Royal Melbourne. That was when I met up with the dialysis unit. And I used to get big money for that, and I bought a car and drove it home. Yeah, but you could because you didn't pay for anything. Yeah. So your wages were, you could do what you wanted to. You're with them, you know. You still had to buy clothes and stuff, which we did.
Before visitors
we were very task-oriented.
Yeah. And before visitors came in, we had to have a tidy up. That involved the patients being sitting like this, all the
sheets.
beds straight in a line.
And all the
quilts
wheels on the
built real
beds
straight.
the same go. Yeah.
Nothing on the trays or the bedside table.
And no marks on them.
And you'd say to them, go to the toilet now because you can't leave a bed when the visitors are here. You might see something. And it was and if you didn't have it absolutely straight, you would cop heaps from the charge nurse.
Yeah, and it was the same when the doctors did rounds. It was like a contingent of people, like you'd have your doctor, and then you'd have matron, and then you'd have your registered nurse with the charts and writing. Then you'd have your junior nurses. And what happened was you put the screens around the bed, and then you had these particular processes you went through. You sat your patient up, and then you pulled a pillow down so nobody could see their knickers on their back, and then you pull the sheet up to there, and then when the doctor wanted to examine the chest, you got on the other side of the bed, and this was the senior nurse. You'd have two junior nurses under that, because if anything needed getting, like pens or another chart or something, you'd send off a junior nurse to run around and get it, and then you'd roll up the shirt to here, and then they'd listen to the chest, you'd roll it down, and you'd lift up this bit. Remember all that? And if they had to examine the tummy, you only exposed the amount of tummy that needed to be. It's all very thing. And in the towers where I trained, we had nets, and they were kind of steel beds with a steel thing around like that. And then we had to have the net. You had to fold the net back over the top, so it was all even like that. And then this bit went around the bedpost like that. And it had to be the same. So when you walked into the ward, and then you remember matron was there, and she'd just scan the whole thing. Every wheel had to be there. You couldn't have anything on that, and you had to have a fresh soap and a fresh hand towel for the doctors on the sink, and there was to be not a speck of anything on the sink, and that was it. And as a registered nurse, you'd walk in before rounds. You'd know. Because you'd hear, they'd let you know that they were in this ward or that ward or somewhere. And then you stood at the door, matron and the doctor went off, and the staff of that ward just went about their things. And then if anything was wrong, you'd cop it and go dunka, 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 dunka down the line. Didn't it? Yeah.
Before we started a shift, we'd meet outside the matron's office, and she'd call you in, and you'd all stand in a row. There'd be four of us. You'd show the front of your hands to show your nails were clean and short. Over here to make sure your wrists were clean and your cuffs, we had starch cuffs, they were clean. Then you'd step back so she could look to see the length of your uniform. Then she'd inspect your hat, and we couldn't have a wisp of hair. We all looked like we were alopecia clones. And then you'd have to turn around and bend over so she could make sure that you did have stockings on, petticoat on, and no one could see your knickers. And then you were free to go. And
no makeup, no nail polish, no rings, no
I used to
nothing.
never wear stockings, and because I was really brown, I used to tan, and I'd put the eyebrow pencil up my leg. And one day she came to me and she said, "I have heard that you have not been wearing your uniform," and I was so terrified. I said, "No, matron." She said, "You will wear that uniform, you will do 4 hours in the PTS, you will never ever do this behaviour again." And she said, "And I also heard that you have your stockings just below your knees. How do they stay up?" I said, "I put sixpence in it and twist it around and fold it under." She said, "Why do you do that?" I said, "Kath wanted to make a phone call." Yeah. One day I was working in the hospital as a nurse manager, and up came an edict from Queensland Health that there was redundancies except for registered nurses who were working in the wards. And so I rang my cohort. I used to work 1 week on and have 1 week off, and she'd work the other week and have a week off. So I rang her. I got her at 2 o'clock in the morning in Scotland, and I said, "There's a vacancy. There's something has come up that there is redundancy in Queensland Health. Do you want me to put in for you?" She said, "Yes." So we did. But when I gave her the letter to the manager, he said, "You can't get redundancy. You're the staff that work in the wards." said, no, our job description says we're managers. So it went on to the next one, the CEO up in Rocky, who rang down and said, you can't put in for that because you work in the wards. And we said the same thing again, no, our job descriptions say we're nurse managers. So off it went to a Director General down in the Health Department who rang us and said, you can't do that. We repeated ditto, 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 and some weeks later we got our redundancy. And so when we both left, I did a collage on both of us from the start of our nursing career to the end, and we wore our veils, and that was our uniform then, shirts and slacks, and if the matrons from way back had have seen that, they would have all had swoons.
Yeah, one of probably the most interesting and diverse jobs I've had, and I think Pam will say so too, is working community health. I've previously worked at Aurobindo and places like that, which was community and nursing, as well as Blue Care and places like that. But community health was something else, and it was new. It was a new concept in nursing. There was a team of 4 nurses.
Started off with 2, and then I joined 2 weeks after them, so there was 3 of us, and we had a home help organiser.
And a social worker, or a physio.
Not when we first started.
Not when you first started, yeah.
We didn't even know who or what they were in those days.
No, so we were bits of free spirits, I suppose, and we had a mandate, didn't we? What we had to do.
We all had portfolios. You could choose what you wanted to do, so we all got portfolios that we thought we could do and something interesting, and it was a very rich life. Yeah,
we were supported by Rockhampton, who had had some educators and a good resource of information for us, and they would provide us with brochures. But we did things when the AIDS thing was on. We did a lot of education in schools about AIDS and in the community. We did knits. We went everywhere because we had this incredible outbreak of knits that's ongoing, I suppose, all over the world. And we had a lot of fun. I can remember a class at Calliope in years 1 and 2, and I was standing out there and I said, we're going to talk about knits, and we had all these pictures, and this little girl started, I've got 'em, and her brother said, shut up. Yeah, it was funny, but we had a good time. Testicular cancer we did, smoking.
I used to do all the workforces, and so I went to Calliope once, and about 150 men came up,
council,
and you could always pick who was going to give you trouble. And so I said, no, we're going to talk about testicular cancer today. It's the most easiest treated cancer of the lot. But I do need someone to help me, so I picked out who the troublemaker was. I said, this gentleman seems to be well known, so if you'd like to come up and help me. So he came up, being smart all the way. And then I said, now, well, I'm going to teach you how to do your self-examination. Could you just slip off your trousers, please? And he just went straight back down to his chair, and I had no trouble from him the rest of the do. Yeah, but we had a lot of fun. Yeah. And this is some of the things. There's just 3 of us dressed up. We were having a week of specials. So we put this board out the front. AIDS counselling, AIDS. Yeah. Bring a friend to the price of one. Bring a big stick and earmuffs. Antenatal classes. This is for parents. New 10-month program. Physio fitness for a good bang. See Jenny. She was the physio. Jenny was the physio at the time. A very nice little girl. Social work, disco here tonight, family planning, do-it-yourself vasectomy kits, home help, have your drawers spring cleaned. So we had a lot of hack funding in those days, so a lot of these came from that. We did things like we saw people in their own homes. This is a little one, one of the very first Vietnamese families that came to the area. We did some fundraising, and Pam's got a whole lot of This one
there?
here, we had a call that a family was requiring some in-depth care and support. So we went up to get that family and bring them all down from out back. And when we got down there, they said, but what about, I think it was Pollyanna or something. We can't leave Pollyanna up there, she has no one to feed her. I said, oh, how old's Pollyanna? She said 8 months. So we jumped into the car and raced back to get Pollyanna. And there's Pollyanna. She was an 8-month-old calf. So we had some surprising things that happened.
Yeah, so then we had this fellow, and we got the idea.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
got the idea that he needed a good holiday, but
He was a quadriplegic.
He was a quad, yeah, and he's seen there with a lot of the girls from community health, and we decided we had to do some fundraising. So what we did, we went out to the rifle range and we had a competition. This is all of us, a charity shoot. That was in 1987.
Made a couple of $1,000 out of it. We had a market and we had everybody in Gladstone donate stuff to our market. We had it across the road at the Home Help Organisers' spare block of land. We had everything from a beast to homing pigeons. We sold them 3 times. People would buy them and take them home, they'd come back. We had fortune teller. We had a well-known elderly lady who would sing and tap dance. Even when we kept on turning the power off, she'd keep going. And one of our neighbours gave us a Brahman cow, about a year old, and a man from out of Calliope bought it. My husband took it home for him in our truck, and when he was letting it out, he got the rope around its neck, and my husband said, I don't think you should stand there, but he did, and it caught the beast took off, caught him on the leg, broke his leg, and my husband was ages. He rang up, he said, I won't be home for a while yet. I said, where are you? He said, I'm up at the hospital. Oh, goodness gracious. So that was a market with a difference. Community health.
We were really the masters of everything.
We were 4 staff, home help girl and a child nurse.
And the receptionist.
And the receptionist. Mm. And we had terrible storms, and all downstairs of our building was flooded out. We couldn't go downstairs. There was no help available in those days. And so we all had to go and get spades, and here we are digging tunnels out to the gutter in the front road to get the water out of the building. So we were a jack of all trades. And we had a lot of fun in community health. And
we did. Here's some of the other things that we did. Dress-ups, responding to themes of whatever was happening at the time.
Well, one night, I think you were there, I was doing a talk on cancer, and we had projectors, and we'd gone all around town getting all these people to come, and all these people were coming, and we had supper and chairs everywhere, and we put the projector on, and it went for 2 minutes and broke. And the bulb went. So we rang up somebody, and yes, if I could get a bulb very soon, so I have a bulb come back. Oh God, we put it in, started, and it went for 4 minutes and broke. So we ended up doing a verbal oral presentation, which was quite good because we all put 2 and tuppence into it and had a nice tea, and we didn't leave till about 10:30, and we were supposed to go until about only 8 o'clock. So it worked out very good. And I remember when we were at Community Health, there was a fashion parade down at one of the hotels, and I said, well, we should really go and support that. That'll be a little kindy trying to earn money. We all went. Did you come to that? Yeah. So down we went at lunchtime. It was only a lunchtime parade, and it cost us something to get in, but we were pleased to support the little mums having their fashion parade. Anyway, all these men were coming in work clothes, dirty and smelly.
And guess who wanted to sit in the front seat?
Yeah, so we were up the front seat, and And I thought, this is strange. What are these men coming to the little mum's fashion parade for? Anyway, then they started, and out came the models, and they had dirty negligees. They were dirty, and you could see right through them. I said, oh my God, they've forgotten their undies. And then we realised that we really shouldn't have been there. It wasn't what we thought. But we were all too embarrassed to get up and went our way through this great mob of heavy breathing workmen. We didn't know it was a nude
We didn't
fashion
know it
parade.
was a kind of a lingerie, whatever it was, thing.
We'd
for
never had one
fellas.
in Gladstone before. And we just couldn't move. We were all stuck to the seats with our heads down, hoping that no one could see us, but they kept singing out rude things to us. I'm so pleased when the fashion parade finished. They all had to go fast to get back to work, and we all just sort of limped out. I remember once we had a
Projects.
dear old lady in hospital, and her son come up from Bullamakanka, and he came down to see if he could get a chair to take her for an outing over the weekend. So yes, a wheelchair was provided, and he was there on the Monday morning, and he went to the nurse in charge of, not in charge, but who was helping him on his way. And he said, I brought the wheelchair back. And this particular girl said, no, keep it, take it again, take it as long as you want. Take your mother out in it and go shopping and take her for a drive. She said, but no, I don't need it anymore. Oh, yes, you will. Stay as long as you want. And we all kept pushing, and she was pushing very much for him to use the resources that we had for his mother. He said, but she died. So we went very quietly.
And we were very well received by the community too, which made it a lot easier. Like all of when you think about some of the education programs we did, we partnered with QAL, the City Council, and Boyne Smelters, all the Calliope, all the schools like Education Queensland, all of those. You know, we're supporting a heck of a lot of overseas students, and that's fine. But it costs quite a lot of money to be an enrolled nurse.
And they're preferring to do the enrolled nurse to the RN.
Because it's cheaper and it's got
Yeah,
less
you need the
responsibility.
RN one.
But you need those girls with that experience, and you cannot compensate for experience, you know. And I think
And knowledge.
And knowledge, yeah. But the knowledge comes from opportunity and experience. And if people are stuck in one little box, they don't get the broadness of the responsibility. By seeing life in the raw, and you see it right from if you're a midwife delivering babies till aged care, you know, helping people die. Now I don't mean euthanasia about that either. I mean having the skills to let people have a dignified, comfortable death, which is important to most nurses. It's just a privilege to be able to be there in those times, and you have to get, if you can't hack it, well, you walk away. But there's horses for courses. There's all kinds of different nurses, and different kinds of people fit in different niches in nurses. I think the older nurses with their older training, because they saw a more diverse, had a more diverse experience, I think they're more likely to be able to fit in anywhere. But the nurses today sometimes don't. They choose something that is not so challenging, busy, kind of jobs. You know, it's a great privilege to be a part of their lives when they're the most vulnerable, I think. And I think that people who've got a nurturing nature, they get a lot of satisfaction out of being able to reach out for people and have them respond to them.
Thank you for watching. If you hit like down below and leave us a lovely comment, we'd love to hear from you. And also make sure you hit subscribe and see the next videos that will be uploaded every couple of days.